We are live. We're looking at day two here of my 100 days of streaming. Man, I can't believe I just said that out loud. But here I am, getting in the trenches here, doing it for the love of the game, and just streaming as much as I can, getting as good as I can at this because it's something I have to do and believe it's important. So, anyways, let's get into it. Specifically today, it is Thursday, and I really want to talk about the theory. What theory, you ask? The theory of entertainment. The name of this channel, right? So on Thursdays, what I want to do is focus on different aspects of the theory as much as possible here and kind of break down and elucidate for you here what I'm even talking about. Because, this stuff's in my brain all the time. I got to tell it to someone. You guys are here, so you're going to have to listen up, right? So today I want to talk about specifically the theory of entertainment. For those of you who do not know, the theory is that there's no such thing as entertainment. Seriously, it does not exist. This thing that we believe or talk about as, this thing being a mere child's thing, right? Whether that's games, toys, movies, any form of entertainment. In fact, the things that are most quote unquote entertaining tend to actually be looked down upon as forms of media to consume. When in reality, there's no such thing as entertainment. All that is engagement. And the more engaged you are into something, the more important it is for you to pay attention to what it is that you're watching. And that's all that is. And there's an aspect of this theory that kind of goes over this idea that just like how in your body you need food in order to function, your soul also needs some sort of sustenance in order to function as well in an interesting way. You need inspiration. In fact, without inspiration you can't live. Like, seriously, you cannot live without inspiration. It's just not possible. You start to die and eventually something kills you, whether that is by means I can't talk about on YouTube or other situations as well, that can get you killed essentially. But ultimately, you need a reason to live, you need a reason to survive, you need purpose, right? And purpose doesn't come from food, at least not entirely. In the past it may have, in the sense of needing to hunt for food to eat, but we live in a society nowadays where food is in the fridge most of the time, and this idea of starving for 3 to 4 days is almost unheard of by most people. So in essence, we actually need meaning now more than we ever had before in the past. And unfortunately, as some people have noticed, there has been a meaning crisis. So we're going to get into that a little bit in terms of this idea of this meaning crisis and overall the nihilism that's just in the air brewing. Life is meaningless, everything is meaningless, everything is pointless, there isn't a point to anything, right? This idea, right, it's a big thing. And I have a theory here or hypothesis as to why this may be a thing. Now, this won't cover all the reasons as to why this is happening to people. It will not cover it. There's a lot of factors involved. But today, in this conversation, I will cover a lot that I think encompasses a wide spectrum as to why we're feeling like this in our society today. And a lot of it has to do with this aspect of the theory, which is that food, or not food, sorry, media is soul food, right? That's the idea. Media is soul food. And what your soul is searching for is inspiration. And you get that from the media. Uh, and that inspiration is coming from somewhere else outside that media that I don't think I have time to even explain in this conversation. But with that said, let's get into it. So let's talk about food. We all know food, right? Food's awesome. We eat it, we enjoy it. I have food right here next to me, some chocolate I'm going to enjoy later on. Now, the thing about food is that everyone undoubtedly sees its value. We all know the importance of eating. We all know the importance of eating right and eating properly. We all know that there's something there, right? Typically, when you eat something, you have that taste, right? That hooks you in and is like, oh, this is a good meal. This is an enjoyable meal, something that I can actually enjoy and eat, right? That's what happens when you eat something. But there's a second thing that happens when we eat that we're still aware of, but we don't think about as often, which is the digestion. When you eat something, you also digest that food. And then with that digestion, your body extracts those nutrients. And it's those nutrients that not only keep you alive, but also keep you going and make it possible for you to exist, right? So there's this aspect of eating that is so crucial to the human being, to the body. It's undeniable. And in fact, when you eat poorly in the short term, I mean, you get stomach aches, for example, right? If you were to just sit down, actually, it's a fun story. When I was younger, we didn't used to go trick or treating that often. So by the time I was, I don't know, 17, 18, 16, 17, sometime in high school, at that point, I actually had my first, one of my first nights going out and trick or treating. And once we did, we went to just a bunch of houses, got a bunch of candy. And I wasn't used to this at the time because, again, I was a teenager going trick or treating for the first time and got a ton of candy. And of course, you eat all that candy the night you have it. I mean, who's gonna leave candy sitting around in the house? Till this day, if there's chocolate around the house, it doesn't last very, very long. But anyways, so here I am, uh, eating all this candy, and I think it was either the day after or maybe a couple days after that, I had the absolute worst stomach ache imaginable. I never had anything like that happen to me before, and I was shocked. That had never happened before. And it goes to show sort of what happens when you overconsume, specifically things that are vapid, and wasteful, right? That just don't have any substance. So the thing about candy is it has great taste. There's a ton of sugar, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to actual nutrition, it's null and void. There's barely any nutrition. And best believe the following years, I didn't do that again. I didn't consume a bunch of candy until I was completely overstuffed and then had that stomach ache because I learned that there wasn't any value in that. In the same way, back in the day, we used to eat a ton of McDonald's in high school as well. And one of the things about McDonald's is that it's a nice little treat you can have that tastes kind of good. But one thing I had to learn the hard way is that I can't try to get full off McDonald's. What I mean by that is I have quite the appetite. And if, let's say, I were to eat 2 to 3 quarter pounders with cheese, whatever the case is, I'd probably be able to down that in a sitting. But the problem is after that, I have what's called a McCramp. I don't know if you guys have had that before, but the McCramp really, really hurts. And it's a similar aspect, right, of it where for some reason, McDonald's process when making their food tends to extract certain things that make it so that the food lasts long on the shelf, but it doesn't digest very well. It's really hard to kind of digest the food. And because it's so difficult to digest, you get the cramp and eventually it goes away. But since that has happened, I've learned to not try to get full off McDonald's. If I'm eating any McDonald's, it's like a small burger here or there, or some fries or shake, but not try to get full off of it at all because I'm not trying to deal with any McCramps. Now, this is intuitive. This is obvious. This is also important. We know the importance of food, right? And watching what we eat. But conversely, we need more than just food in order to survive. In fact, we actually need inspiration more than we actually need food. And yet, we sometimes watch what we eat, but do we actually watch what we watch? Do we actually take the time to pay attention to what we're observing? Because the same mechanics that exist with your food in terms of the consumption, the digestion, and in turn, the sustenance gained from it also exists within your media and within your soul. And this is really, really important in the sense that part of the crisis that we might be facing here in regards to why so many people are dealing with so much existential crisis is that the nature of our modern stories have changed their focus. And I think in part it has to do with our beliefs surrounding the media itself. If you think that it's just entertainment, that there's no value to it, that you can basically do whatever you want and release it and people eat it up, which is the mentality of a lot of different corporations and some artists, right? Unfortunately, what tends to happen is you're not serving up a good meal. And ultimately, you might get lucky and actually throw something out there that is of value, that does have stakes, and that does ultimately feed someone, right? But most of the time, you're just shooting whatever at the wall and hoping it sticks. And I think that's really, really important to think about here, because ultimately we live in a time where there's no shortage of stuff to watch. There's no shortage of new stuff to watch, but there's a very strong lack of great things to watch. When you eat a great meal at a great restaurant, what do? You go back and eat that meal again. When you eat something great at home that you prepare, what do? You prepare it again. And it's the same thing with great media, in that you're not supposed to watch something that's good once, store it away, and never look at it again. You need to be able to consume it multiple times, because each time you do consume it, what happens is that you're able to digest different things from it and gain different things from it. And let's actually talk about digestion now. So we talked a little bit about food in terms of how it works and the mechanics surrounding it. But those mechanics translate directly over to this idea of media being soul food. So in your media, whether it's a video game, movie, book, whatever you want to consume, right? I don't like that term consume. Whatever you want to take in, right? In that piece of media, you have what's called your hook. It's like this thing that makes it stand out as something that is hyper reality, something that's outside of reality, but that calls on you to pay attention. The hook in media is actually very important. The reason why hooks are very important is because, as humans or people in general, right, we need to be pushed into paying attention, especially in this media landscape where there's just so much going on. There's so much just out there, right? And the reason why a hook is important is because it's so different and so out of the box that it forces you to pay attention to it, and in turn lock in to that piece of media. And that hook, you can compare it to a great tasting meal, something that just tastes amazing. That hook is similar, and it's in there. Now what happens is once you have a great hook, what you need after that hook is the substance, the meat, the cheese, the potatoes if you're vegan, right? You need that meat, that substance that's also found within the product as well, or the um, piece of media, whatever it is that you're taking in, right? You need both working together. And when both are working well, what happens is that you're like, that was great. Let me play this again. That was awesome. Let me watch this again. Maybe not right away. Sometimes it takes some time to have the stuff settle in again. But ultimately, you do end up going back to it and exploring it some more. And part of that process as well, and I think this is also an issue that we do have, and part of the reason why I have this channel in the first place, is digestion. Digestion is really important when it comes to eating food, because you can eat a meal, and if you're not digesting the meal, you're not actually absorbing the nutrients from the food. So there's different things that you need to do when you're eating food in order to make sure that you're properly digesting that food, right? There's a lot of different things that I won't get into right now, but depending on what you're eating, certain things affect how well you're going to absorb the nutrients from that meal or not. I'll give one very quick example, which is fat soluble vitamins, right? Fat soluble vitamins oftentimes will be found in foods that have very little fat. In that case, in order for you to absorb those vitamins, you also need to be eating fats within that meal, so that you're also able to consume and absorb those vitamins as effectively as possible. Whereas if you're just eating them without the fat, it's not going to happen. Same nutrition channel, but this is what I've learned, at least from, oh, God knows how many hours of nutrition study, right? But the point is that you do need to certain tools in order to digest something in a specific way. And I believe it's the same with media as well, where you oftentimes can't just watch a story, be done with it, and you're good. You've digested the story effectively. In fact, on YouTube right now, there's thousands of channels that are doing movie reviews, that are doing spoiler reviews. Why would you watch a review of something you've already watched? Why would you watch a review of something where the person's spoiling the thing? The reason is that you need help with the digestion, in that you want a different perspective and a different take from what you just took a look at, to better understand the piece of media that was in front of you. Because good media, great media, is so massive in its scope that you can't just fully comprehend it on your own by yourself. You need a community of people working together that actually extract as much as possible from that media. And this is why this channel, for example, exists in the first place. The idea here is that I want to take in as much as I can from the media from this perspective of there's no such thing as entertainment, and try to actually download as much of the principles and as much of the substance that we can from the media as possible, right? And that is something that's done in a community, in a group, which is why I'm here right now doing this live in the first place, so that we can build that together. It's not a situation where I'm just going to go and unlock the secrets to Infinity War by myself, right? But I think that collectively as a group we can do that, and I'm gonna do my part by hosting the channel and doing these deep dives, and you guys can do your part as well in the comments and all that, and making sure that we're all deriving that together. But digestion is a key part in the process. So not just taking something in, but once you've taken in that piece of media, with a group of others, taking the time to digest it and extract from it what you need, essentially, right? And when you're able to do that effectively, what ends up happening is that you're able to figure out very quickly which foods or which pieces of media are trash, right? That need to go into the trash bin, right? And which pieces of media are actually on fire, that actually have substance to them, because repeat viewings reveal the quality of that media, as well as deeper analysis revealing the quality of that piece of media. And ultimately, what ends up happening here is when you do rewatch the thing, different things echo from those other conversations that you've had in the past. So it's the digestion part is incredibly important when it comes to media in general. And I think that a lot is lost in that process. And I think it's really, really important for us to look at it in that way. Now, I do want to take a moment here to talk about modern media in general, based off of this same principle here, right? So you have your hook and you have your substance. Now, oftentimes, what you can kind of have in a film or whatever piece of media is you can have a very, very strong hook, right? And oftentimes, because of just how drowning we are in media, very strong hooks are almost overvalued and super important, right? But overvalued nonetheless. Or they're valued so much that the substance is completely missed. So you'll have something that looks amazing, sounds amazing, really is gripping. You're like, what am I watching? And then you stop to analyze and break it down, and you start to realize, oh, there's not much here. And then in turn, you don't go back to it, you don't rewatch it, right? That's typically what you tend to get with a lot of media in the modern day. You do, however, get the flip side of things. And this, I think, is almost worse, surprisingly, actually. You do get sometimes pieces of media that do have some substance in them, but have absolutely no hook whatsoever. And because they don't have an effective hook, what ends up happening is you're just slogging through the thing, trying to get through it, trying to watch it. And you don't recommend it, you don't rewatch it simply because the lack of a hook, right? Because there is no hook in there, there isn't something that's gripping you, you don't want to rewatch it. I'll speak very briefly about a movie here that I'm not going to focus on as much on this channel, but I think is relevant to what I'm talking about here, which is the new Odyssey movie by Christopher Nolan. Shout outs to Nolan, awesome director, but he sometimes has this issue that I'm talking about here, where he sometimes lacks a hook, but he'll have tons of substance. And in certain films it works, and in certain films it does not work. And particularly with the Odyssey, personally, I haven't watched it myself, but from what I can tell, the biggest complaints that I'm seeing from this film specifically is that it lacks an effective hook, which is interesting because it's the Odyssey, right? It's a fantasy story, or I should say, more of a myth, right? That you can turn into a fantasy story if you're bringing it into the modern day. But it looks as though a lot of those mythic elements are stripped away from the piece itself. And because of that, it loses its initial hook that it should have, given that it is a incredibly fantastical story that's being brought to life, right? So when you take away some of that hook, though the principles from the film are very solid, which is so far what I'm seeing. Again, I haven't watched it fully. I'm not planning on watching it. Uh, if you guys really want me to check it out, let me know. I'll consider it. I'll consider it. But ultimately, uh, one of the reasons why I don't want to check it out is there's no hook in it for me. And if I know there's no hook in it for me, I'm going and sitting down through this entire film, 3 hours or so, to pick up some stuff, sure, but that experience is not one that I would want to do a repeat viewing of. And from what I'm understanding as well, is that there's a ton of people that do like the film, but there is also this sense of not wanting to do a repeat viewing of the film, not just immediately, but even long term. And definitely of those who do not like the film, many of them absolutely don't want to rewatch it. And those who are in the middle as well, same thing. It's that rewatchability that isn't there as much. And I think a large part of that has to do with the lack of hook that is within the film, at least from what I'm hearing, right? I have not taken a look at it yet, but that seems to be the early diagnosis from everything I saw from that film. If you did see The Odyssey and you did watch it, let me know if you agree or disagree on this. Is there actually a solid hook going into the movie? Are you are there great visuals? Are there great set pieces? Are there great aspects of the film that really hit in a different kind of way that you don't expect? Is the pacing great? I don't know. Let me know. Let me know if that's the case. I could be wrong here, but the idea here again is that without a proper hook, your piece of media is dead in the water in a sense, or not dead in the water per se, but it definitely matters as well. So a lot of stuff that we have today is either no hook, some substance, or a hook and substance. Now, what's interesting is we just came from an era where we had a series of films that had both a solid hook and some substance to them as well. And of course, if you've been around this channel before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Specifically, the MCU from, I don't know, 2008 to 2019, so an 11-year span, you had what was absolutely unprecedented in media history, which is this idea that you have these films that are not only commercially successful, but they're also, what's the word here? They're also successful critically as well. And the critics, alongside the audiences, are agreeing as well, which prior to the MCU specifically was incredibly rare to see in film, especially in modern movies as well. And you're asking, why is that? What's the reason? It's the same thing I'm talking about now, the hook and the substance. What you tend to have here is during that decade, you had a great hook. The hook gets the butts in the seats, right? Then you have a solid substance. And what that substance does is the substance makes it so that it was actually worth getting into the seat. You recommend it to someone else and you go back and rewatch. So whenever a new movie would come out, guess what would happen? There would be butts in seats and people going in and rewatching it because they were able to figure out both elements. And what was interesting is they took a page out of the kids movie book, which is that a lot of kids films oftentimes will have a very simple theme or a very obvious theme or a very straightforward theme like you shouldn't kill people, you should not go out and get revenge on people, right? Very, very simple basic themes. But the thing about a simple theme is that it's very eternal, let's say. It's a theme that will work yesterday, today, tomorrow, for the most part, right? A lot of these themes are simple rules that one should follow, right? And when you're doing a kids film, it's good to introduce those simple themes because what happens is as the child is watching that, they are learning that theme. And the reason I mean, for those of you who've been children, you'll probably remember this, or those of you who have children, is that a child can watch something 80 times and and still continue wanting to watch it, right? Because what happens is that they're rewatching it and each time they're learning more and more from it and they're digesting it and dissecting those themes as they are. They may not be that complex in the themes, but they're still taking that time digesting it, right? And ultimately they're learning those rules, which are you shouldn't kill people, as an example, right? That's your example of a simple theme. Now, with superhero movies, what you have is you have that amazing hook, which is, hey, this guy can pick up a car. What in the world? Who picks up cars, right? That's your hook. And then on top of that hook, it's even though he can pick up a car, he will not throw it and use that power to kill you because of his values, right? And instantly you watch and learn that if this dude with this muscle mass and this strength is able to use his power effectively, then me as a person with much less power also need to be able to use the power that I do have responsibly. With great power comes great responsibility, right? So ultimately, that's what you get from this era of superhero movies is you get those simple principles that are time tested, eternal almost, essentially, right? And you get that great hook of amazing action sequences, of people picking up cars, of all that stuff. And you mix both of those two together, throw in a little bit of comedy, and you have a hit formula. And it worked. It worked for years until it stopped working. And we're about to see if it's going to start working again. But the point I'm making here is that you have both of those things going for it. And the thing is that not all of these movies were able to do this. There are some that were less successful, and in part, some of that had to do with the execution. And I'm not going to get into a deep dive into that right now because that's what this channel's for, diving deeply into those things. But today, I just want to focus on the theory, right? Which is this idea that you have a sort of soul food that your body needs to take in order for you to have hope, to be inspired, and to embolden a purpose inside of you. And I really do believe that there's a lot of stuff that we have nowadays that has completely forgotten the purpose of why we watch stuff. And in turn, because that purpose is lacking, the thing is being created in a way that does not make sense at all. I'll give a great example here. I've already talked about this thing on the channel. So I have a series of videos on the channel called "My Wife Made Me Watch." It's a series where my wife will watch all kinds of different stuff, and sometimes she's like, "You gotta check this out. This is awesome. You gotta check this out." Right? So she'll get me to watch whatever it is that she'll she's watching that week, right? And one of those things was the beloved series Black Mirror, right? This is, I think, one of our modern day most beloved series. And one of the reasons why is because they have amazing hooks. Specifically, their hooks are incredible. They have all these really cool concepts on technology and how horrible that technology is and how horrible it can get. Hooks are incredible, but I cannot stand that series. To this day, I cannot. And the last video I did on the series was a perfect example of why that was, because in that episode you have this amazing hook, really really cool, right? You have awesome scenes, right? You can tell that the writers know what they're doing, they're skilled, they're effective at executing their craft, right? All that stuff is amazing and great. But because there was a lack of purpose in terms of what the media is supposed to be there for, they fumbled the ending. And this has been the case with a lot of these types of Black Mirror episodes, is there's this existential nihilistic ending to the flick that has no utility at all. And the problem with that is that it just leaves this hole, this gaping hole inside of you. And essentially it's like the show, the episode specifically I'm talking about, basically is telling you to give up. Like towards the end, it literally the guy gives up, kills his spouse, and then I'm getting frustrated just talking about it, right? But this is one of the most beloved episodes of the series, and in particular, it's one of those episodes where it is executed in a great way, but because the ending essentially gives no hope and is uninspired as an ending, what ends up happening is that there is no utility to the episode, and ultimately, you don't want to rewatch it. And it's been the case for me with a lot of these episodes. I'm curious to see for Black Mirror lovers whether or not they actually rewatch their favorite episodes often or not. I'm very curious as well. But essentially, the issue here is that because the themes are nihilistic in nature, and then the solution to those themes tend to be ones that are basically give up, right? Fall victim to the nihilism and just accept it for what it is. Those endings give no hope. And if you're consuming enough of those antivitamins, let's say, right? Eventually you how can you not pick up that kind of demeanor, right? Where you just feel like there's nothing you can do about your situation. You just feel like there's nothing you can do about your life. You just feel like there's nothing you can do about the state of the world, right? That just happens. There's this funny joke where my wife tends to say that I have like a hero complex. So it's like if something's going on, if there's a problem somewhere, I want to go try and figure it out and solve it, right? But ultimately, I'm even just realizing it now on this stream. I probably have that because I've watched so much superhero content over the years that I try to do something about problems that I see in front of me. I try to actually believe that something can be done. And that's been sort of wired and programmed in. But guess what? That's a hopeful perspective. And that's important because in a place in time where we have lost hope, we need that. We need that more than ever. It's why, till this day, even though these superhero movies have fallen off for the most part, anytime there is one that is coming back that has a nice hook, that has solid themes, people are lining up to watch it. People are excited to go see it because we know that we need this type of food, believe it or not. And that's very, very important. In fact, we have Spider-Man around the corner. Tomorrow night, my wife and I are going to go check it out. And people are excited for this movie. Why? Because with great power comes great responsibility. That's the theme. That theme is incredible as a theme because what we tend to realize is that we need responsibility as a people, we need it. And we need to learn from Spidey, from Tom Holland, from Pete, how to use or do things responsibly, right? How to use your power responsibly. These are all lessons in which we need to learn because we live in a day and age now where we have more power than any other group of people throughout the entire history of humanity. And we need to figure out how to do that, right? And yeah, it's why these things are important. And ultimately, on this channel, this theory that I have here, right, theory of entertainment, I do believe that it's so ingrained into the nature of narrative and media and how we just conceptualize things that this works for every genre that I've looked into it for. Whether that's video games, whether that's literature, whether that's movies, it works with every subgenre and niche that I've seen, whether that's fantasy, whether that's comedy, whether that's drama, whether that's superhero stuff. It just works everywhere, right? And the same principles I've been talking about this whole episode in terms of this digestion aspect of things, all that it works within all those other spaces. But particularly, I tend to focus on superhero stuff here. Why? One of the reasons is, I mean, I love it. It's awesome stuff. It's super fun, right? But the other reason is that there's a key principle within superhero related media that's intrinsic to the actual, I don't know if I can call it a genre, but intrinsic to the actual idea of being a superhero, which is this idea of self sacrifice for others and how that self sacrifice needs to be a choice that you choose to do, right? And how that is the basis of what makes a hero, what makes a superhero, right? Is that ability to say, you know what? Everything's horrible right now, going through a whole bunch of kind of mess, all kinds of different messes. But that person across the street needs my help. I'm gonna go help them. Right? It's what Peter Parker's all about, which is this idea of he's going through all these different struggles in his life. He's going through all these different problems. He has to pay his bills. He's late on a bunch of things. But despite all of those issues, Pete chooses to take up responsibility and go help others even though it's a detriment and a sacrifice to himself. Right now, I'm doing this stream. I'm planning on doing 100 days of streaming. I don't have to do that, right? But at the same time, I can't I can't not do what it is that I know I need to do, right? It's like there's this sense of responsibility that comes with this ability that I do have to yap for hours about whatever, right? And I have to be able to do something about that because I do believe that someone out there does need it. And this idea of sacrificing of yourself for someone else is the ultimate path to purpose. And once you have purpose, there's nothing you can't do. But without purpose comes nihilism, comes, all kinds of craziness, right? And that happens because of the lack of purpose. And one of the things that gives one purpose is their ability to sacrifice of themselves for others, right? But voluntarily in a way where they want to do it. And what I love about superhero stuff is that ultimately that is the key guiding principle within all of these stories. And the characters that fail to meet it are not heroes, but instead villains. And the ones that do meet it are the ones that actually are considered and seen to be heroic. And that to me is worth study. It's worth a ton of study. And here I am focusing on that here today. Well, not so much. I'm getting to the theory today, but ultimately, it's what I want to focus on this channel with a lot of these different movies and reviews that are coming into play. So, A, if you're interested, if you enjoy some capes, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe, and get on this journey with me for real. It's day 2 here of the streams. I have not picked a specific time yet for each day of the streams because life is pretty chaotic right now with 4 young children, let's say 3 young children and another one on the way. So I can't necessarily pick the exact time in which I'll be streaming, but I'll be streaming once a day every day for the next 100 days. So yeah, that's my stream for today in terms of what I had prepared, talking about this aspect of the theory. So again, what we talked about today simply is that media is soul food, right? And that the media you consume is even more important than the actual food that you consume for your well-being and your health, because without purpose you can't do anything. Without purpose you're not going to go get up and go to the fridge and grab food, right? Purpose is more important than your nutrition itself, right? So the food itself is important, and that we need to pay attention to our media essentially, but also take time digesting that media effectively in order to gain the most benefit from it and the most benefit from that media in general. And that ultimately here, uh, I think that the most worthwhile genre, at least for me to study, is the superhero genre. And that's what we're going to be doing here on this channel. But with that said, I'm going to take a look here and see what is going on in my comments section. All right, so where's the chat? Okay, so far it looks like it's just me here chilling. No one in the chat left, which is fine. We're gonna get there. Either way, I'm here streaming once a day over the next little while here and see where things go. One thing I want to talk about a little bit before I exit, maybe I should save this for another episode. I don't know. I was thinking about Avengers, right? And in particular, this is on topic because you have the homie Thanos, right? Which is one of the best villains that we've had in cinema in a long time, right? A lot of people love Thanos, and most of Thanos's, you know, most of Thanos's arc essentially was all in maybe one movie, two movies tops. You didn't hear anything about him before. But one of the things about Thanos that's really good and that works is his motivation, particularly uh, being a response to this idea that, you know, everything's pointless, meaningless in a way, because ultimately we're going to run out of resources. And once we run out of resources, excuse me, everyone dies and everything collapses, right? And that was his belief, that ultimately, in order to defeat that, you had to, wipe out half the universe, right? So in a way the character kind of represents this existential dread of there's nothing we can do, there's nothing we can do to stop what's going on here, and ultimately his solution is to wipe out half the universe, and in a way what that character tends to represent, in part, is a character who is nihilistic, right? And you can see it in his performance itself. you'll notice that he's very removed. I'm talking about Josh Brolin's performance. He's very removed from a lot of situations. He says he doesn't find enjoyment in what he's going to do, but he's going to do it anyway because it has to be done, right? I mean, doesn't that sound like someone going to work who hates what they're doing, but they gotta do it anyway, right? So he's really representing that aspect of our world, of our day, right, of our society. And he says that the solution is to wipe everyone out, and then once he actually goes and does that, he sits and he's happy. And I find what's interesting is that in the sequel to which is Endgame, for those of you who haven't seen these movies and you're on this channel, I apologize. There might be some very light spoilers here. I don't think I'm spoiling too much here, but there is some very light spoilers. Let's just say the solution to Thanos, right? Or this aspect of existential dread and nihilism, the solution to that is for our heroes specifically to sacrifice of themselves in order to save everyone else in the universe that was just snapped away, right? Or that was just destroyed, right? So, this idea of in order for them to save everyone, in order for them to beat this image of nihilism, this image of existential dread, right? In order for them to defeat that, is for them to find purpose in ultimately sacrificing themselves fully to the cause and fully committing to that all the way through. And you see that happen with several characters throughout that movie as well. And I think that's a good example here of what I'm talking about today, right? In terms of what makes these stories and these characters in these movies so awesome, right? Is that that main principle is there throughout, and the villain who is willing to do everything he possibly can to achieve his goal, except for ultimately, I guess, being willing to sacrifice others, right? Essentially to achieve his means, right? That's the villain, which is kind of the antithesis of sacrificing of yourself. Rather than sacrificing of yourself, you're sacrificing others to get what you want. That sort of goes at a head. That philosophy collides, right? And yeah, those movies are very interesting in terms of how that plays out. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about that briefly as well and bring that up because I'm thinking of doing a deep dive rewatch of Infinity War and Endgame leading up to Doomsday. And yeah, just doing a live scene by scene reaction to it and really breaking it down in terms of those specific themes and how they're woven throughout both of those movies. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know. I'll figure out a way to get it to you. I know with YouTube you might not be able to get that out there, so maybe I have to create a Patreon or something. But let me know if you guys are interested in that as well, and I'll take a look at doing that. And with that said, here I'm gonna call it a night, and I'll see you guys next time on Theory of Entertainment. My name is Lex. There's no such thing as entertainment, and next time we speak, I'm pretty sure I would have seen the next Spider-Man movie. So who knows? Maybe I'll chat a little bit about that. Anyways, it's your man Lex. I'm out. Peace.